This was an interaction I had with Vontaze Burfict with the Bengals a few years back. He gave me a quote in the locker room when I asked if he could do an interview that basically said, bleep off, I don't give a bleep, blah, blah, blah. It was a long form, no comment, but in a really rude and kind of like terrible manner of saying it. And I tweeted out a quote. Vontaze didn't want to talk. He said, you can bleep off with, I bleeped it out, obviously. It got a lot of reaction. Vontaze ended up sending me a DM and basically threatening me. And that's okay. Vontaze did that to a lot of people. But in my heart, I was like, man, I didn't need to do that, And so I've learned from some dumb mistakes like that.
Welcome to The Next Level Journalist, where you will hear from some of the best journalists in the business or who have been there, done that, and willing to share with you what they've learned so you can get better, faster. Today's guest is someone I've known since about 2013. He's a sports anchor / reporter at the Fox affiliate in Cincinnati. Jeremy Rauch, thank you for making time for this today.
Kyle, I've seen like the star-studded list of people you've had on this. And so I was like waiting, when is my shot? Krista Lander got on here, Joe Danneman, and now it's me. So I'm honored.
Well, listen, I want to tell a quick story. You just mentioned Krista. So when I was talking to Mary Jo Perino on here, this is to give people an idea of just how small of a world this is, this TV industry. When her and I were talking, she brought up the fact that, that you interned at LAX 18. Of course, I worked at LAX 18 many years later. You worked with Mary Jo and Alan Cutler, who I worked with. And then you just mentioned Krista. You worked with her in Illinois. I worked with her in Texas. You and I did not know each other until around that 2013 year when, you came to Northern Kentucky, which, you're a Kentucky guy or a Cincinnati guy, right?
So I'm actually from Central Ohio, near Columbus. So about 2.5 hours north up the road. And so it's funny, just being a local TV, a lot of the times people will say, oh, you've got to be a Xavier guy, or you've got to be a UC guy, especially here in Cincinnati. It's like, no, I'm actually a huge Buckeye fan, but I don't broadcast that to the world a whole lot, being where I'm from. But, I got love for the NKY as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, just the connections that you and I had before we actually, like I said, linked up. And of course, when I worked at LAX 18 and you were at Fox, we would exchange videos. So obviously we got to know each other a little better there, like from a working standpoint. But again, the moral of the story is just to let people know, whoever sees this, just how small of an industry this is to have that close of connections with other people across, the country.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, this business is so strange because it feels like when you're trying to get your first shot, and Kyle, this, it's so hard to break in. And I must have sent my resume reel to 50 different stations right out of college. And I only got a few callbacks, maybe 3 out of 50. And the place that I ended up landing was just a place that had a guy that went to Asbury University where I went as well. He had connections with, he called them, and they finally gave me a call and gave me a shot. And from then on, I mean, you can certainly get jobs based on, pure talent and a little bit of luck as well. But if you know people, I mean, to think about how I got to Cincinnati, Kyle, Alan Cutler, and Alan Cutler, but not everyone knows Alan Cutler like to the core. And I know him pretty well, and you do as well. This guy's a little rough around the edges. He's a goofball. He's so many things that it's difficult to describe. But I'm going to tell you what, Alan Cutler cares about former interns that he says that he saw working hard and getting the job done. Alan Cutler did so much for me. He called Joe Danneman and said, give this kid a shot. Jared Smalley up in Columbus said, give this guy a shot. Others in Columbus called Joe Danneman and said, give this kid a shot when I was 26 years old to come here to Cincinnati. And so this business is really small, but having those connections and keeping those connections can really help you along the way.
I'm so glad you shared that. I mean, you're already bringing some value to this conversation, and I haven't even asked you a question yet. That's why you're awesome. So let's get to know you a little better. Let's go back to the beginning, if you will, when you first got interested in this career, that moment where you're like, this is what I want to do. And just basically your path, lay it out to us. You already touched on how you broke through, but take us back to when you got interested, where you went to school, and then bring us up to date.
Yeah, so I mean, I was like a lot of kids growing up. SportsCenter was always on in the house. And I thought that I wanted to go pro in something. For me, it would have been something like basketball. You know, I love basketball. That was my favorite sport. I like soccer and golf and baseball and stuff. But I got to a point early in high school where I was like, I'm not going to go pro in basketball. This is not going to happen. My jumper's not good enough to overcome my 5'11" and a half frame. So I got to a point my junior year of high school, my mom was pushing on me pretty hard. What are you going to do in college? Where are you going to go? What are you going to be? And I had this fear that I was going to be sitting in an office or a cubicle looking at Excel spreadsheets. And I was like, that's not me. I like math, but I don't want to do numbers. I don't want to crunch numbers for a living. I just can't envision that. And the only thing I could think of was I just want to have fun. I want to have a career that's fun. And that I want to pursue. It's something that's a part of, you know, everything that encompasses who I am and what I love. One thing that I thought of, honestly, Kyle, was I thought about going into something to do with ministry. I didn't know what that was going to be, whether it was being a youth pastor or whatever. That was one thing that crossed my mind, but I kept coming back to broadcasting. I always loved doing things like that around the house. And so I had a friend that was going to Asbury University. At that time, it was Asbury College down in Wilmore, Kentucky, not too far from Lexington. And he's like, why don't you just come visit? So I went to visit, and they had a great media comm department. And really, once I got there, it was like, okay, let's go forward with this. Still kind of thinking, this seems like a wild thought. I was in a band as well. I had a thought of being a musician. That didn't feel like a very illustrious career unless I was going to make it big. And so I stuck with media. I started out in radio. I took one acting class with a guy named Jeff Day my sophomore year because I was told acting would help in broadcasting. And it was a class of maybe 40 kids. And he pulled me and one other guy aside, and Jeff told me, you are going to be on TV and you're going to be great. And I needed that because at the time it was, I might just do radio. I can talk for an hour or two. You know, I enjoyed that my freshman year trying that out. But just taking an acting class before I did any kind of TV classes, Jeff Day telling me that, and I still talk to him to this day at times, it was like, okay, I can do this. And that really kind of paved that path for me to stick with it. And eventually I landed my first TV job in Dalton, Georgia, a couple years later.
Was it Georgia to Illinois from there?
So I have a very unique, Kyle, I feel like if people listen to my story and they think if this is how I got to make it in TV, I'm not sure I want a piece of this. I will just say this, I had a very unique start. And without going too in depth, I'll at least tell you this. Asbury offers an opportunity for students to work the Olympics,
right?
Whether it be the winter or the summer. And it's kind of, you got to be doing your extracurriculars and stuff to get a shot and have good grades. But I got to go to the Beijing Olympics in 2008, right after I graduated in May 2008. The problem, as you know, in local TV was people would interview me and say, we want you to come in here at the beginning of August. Football season's starting. You know what I mean? You got to be here for football season. And I would say, I'm going to be in Beijing, China, the entire month of August in 2008. And so I actually didn't get a couple of jobs because of that. People told me, do not give up the Olympics to start your local TV career. Don't do it. And so I stuck with that. And I got the job in Dalton, Georgia, and I worked there for about 10 months. And then I got married summer of 2009 when my wife graduated college. And she was going to be an accountant. And there was nothing for her in Georgia where I was. And we couldn't really find any other landing spots. And so we were at a crossroads. We literally met with our minister right before we got married and asked him, Dean Cook, God love him. He's meeting with me and my wife. And we're asking him, which career path should we follow? I mean, you talk about pressure. It's like and Dean Cook is a great man, was Laura's pastor growing up. And I thought for sure, Dean Cook knows Laura the best. He's going to say, Laura, you go work for PricewaterhouseCoopers in this city. And Jeremy, good luck to you. I've known Laura for years. We sit down with Dean Cook and Dean says, okay, it sounds to me like Jeremy might have a harder time finding a job somewhere, whereas Laura, you could find the job anywhere. And so we wanted to get out of Georgia, and Dean leans my way and says, why don't you follow Jeremy's career path? Because I think, Laura, you could find a job anywhere else in what you do. You're more marketable. And Laura wanted to kill me for a day. But then a day later, she was like, I forgive you. I'm not going to resent you. I knew a couple of friends in Zanesville, Ohio, WHIZ, still a small market. but she could get a job in Columbus, Ohio with Ernst & Young, another company she linked up with. And so that paved the way for us to find a landing spot for our first couple of years of marriage. And then after Zanesville, so it's Dalton, Georgia, then it's Zanesville. I'm floating around in small market town over here, you know, like when is my shot going to come? And then through some connections, I got a job in Illinois at WICS from 2011 to 2013 before I came to Cincinnati. So a very weird path, you know, Dalton, Georgia, cable TV station, WHIZ in Zanesville, Illinois, and then at Fox 19 in Cincinnati the last 7 years.
That's awesome, Jeremy. The advice that you would give to someone who's in college, you know, and that aspiring to be a sports journalist, TV journalist, what would you tell them? I mean, you've already given great insight to what your journey was like. And again, we're all going to have, or all will have, a unique journey, no matter what it is we do. But this TV industry is crazy if they haven't figured it out just by listening to your story. But what would you tell someone who's trying to break through, trying to get in to, I mean, such an ultra competitive, like getting into TV is one thing, but getting into sports, that's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah. And the thing that I tell a lot of people who, interns that we have or students that I come in contact with, Kyle, is understand the way you can pick any city in any market in the world, understand how it works. Okay. So Cincinnati as a market has 4 different TV stations. Not every market does. Some have less than that in smaller markets, but usually you have around 3. And you may have 2 or 3 sports guys per station, as you know. You're going to have a lot more reporters. You're going to have more anchors, more weather people. But sports is like giant newsroom. And over there, there's the 2 little sports guys over there. They can have the end of the newscast, you know. And so it's really competitive because people want to do sports. It is so much fun to find yourself at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough and look up and think, how in the heck am I covering an NFL game? This happened to me in 2014, my first road game with the Bengals against the Patriots in primetime. How in the heck did I get in Gillette Stadium covering an NFL game? And I'm on the sidelines for it watching Tom Brady throw fastballs and just crush the Bengals, which is what happened in that game. But I digress. That is why people want to do sports, man. It is so cool. Mm-hmm. But listen to this advice, if I can just deliver some here. Understand that the classroom is important. You're going to learn a lot of things. You can do a lot of things on campus. If you have a great studio, TV studio on campus, take advantage of that. But nothing will advance you as much as an internship and real world experience and just getting out there and being like, I am here to do something. I had 2 internships. I had a chance to do some freelancing through some connections with ESPN, camera work basically. And I think the Speed Channel, just things like that, where I got out and saw what it's like, what this really looks like, and then interning at 2 different stops. And then just kind of being around outside of those internships and saying, if you have something, will you please call me? I can't speak enough to that. I mean, you can get good grades all college long, and that's great. It's important. But for you to have those in-person experiences where you are understanding what the grind looks like, what it looks like just building a random VOSOT, a random 45-second VOSOT, you know, 20-second video, 25-second side, however you want to call it, like simple, mundane stuff in TV, understanding what that looks like. And then also understanding that even though sports and what we do is a lot of fun, it really is. The fun outweighs everything, that you're going to work something like, I don't know, 2 to midnight, 5 days a week. So I think all of that is helpful. And then you can really shape whether or not you really want to do this.
That's a great point, Jeremy. You know, I talked, when I made my own video on here, I talked about 2 things that would surprise people that you don't need in order to break through to this business. One of them was that you didn't need a journalism degree. And the fact is, you know, I know people that don't have that, but it will better prepare you. Another thing being an internship. You don't need it, but it's invaluable in that when you have that, everything you just said there, you're as prepared as if nothing like the classroom or nothing like a textbook is going to do, because it opens your eyes to everything about what you're pursuing. And Joe even said in one of our conversations, your counterpart, who we'll talk about in a little bit, that, you know, when you get inside that, you know, that newsroom and have that internship, you figure out if it's for you. I mean, you get to see what it's like It's a pretty stressful environment. Even though it is sports and fun, you're always on deadlines. And, we could talk again about internship the rest of this way and just how valuable it really is. So I'm glad you brought that up. But I want to move towards what you feel makes you as good as you are at your job. I mean, you don't just, coincidentally land in Cincinnati. What do you think it is that contributes and has contributed to your success thus far?
Well, I want to tell you about a really hard conversation I had before I came to Cincinnati to kind of set up what I think makes me unique. And hopefully I can answer this question the best way possible, because sometimes describing yourself is difficult.
Yeah.
News directors at any stop, a lot of them will be pretty brutally honest with you, because they meet a lot of people. They meet a lot of people that aren't going to work out. They see a lot of tapes and resume reels that aren't going to work out. There was a place in Milwaukee before I came to Cincinnati. I drove up from Illinois, Central Illinois. I don't even remember what station it was. I think it might have been the CBS. And I had a long shot. I knew it was a long shot. They told me I was maybe top 10. I said I wanted to come for an in-person interview. And I knew they liked me, but I didn't think they liked me enough to give me the job. So I kind of asked through a connection, can I just come in person? And can we talk? And so I drove up from Central Illinois. I think it was like 4 or 5 hours, I forget. And I get in there and I walk into this news director's office, and I'm like, this is a long shot. I'm going to put my best foot forward. We sit down and we chat. And the first thing he says to me is, would you consider being a news reporter? And I thought about it, and I'm like, man, he's like, you make more money, you'd be more marketable, you could be hireable right now, possibly here. And I just thought to myself, man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to tell like breaking news stories. I don't want to do hard news. I love sports. I love the joy that I get to spread through journalism in a lot of ways and the stories that I tell. And then he says to me, let me be honest with you. He says, you're a young white guy. And kind of puts me on the spot. And I'm like, okay. And he says, you are not something that is a hot commodity right now. You're a young white guy. He's like, look around.
Yep.
Look around at guys you went to school with, other guys at TV stations that you know. You see a lot of young white guys who can all do the exact same thing that you're doing. He's like, I can get you anywhere. I can get you anywhere to me, to my face. And I'm like, can you? Because I'm a weirdo. So he tells that to me, and that from that moment on, I remember I went to my LinkedIn profile and I was like, I wrote something about trying to do it different than anyone else I know who looks exactly like me. Something like that. I forget how I worded it. And from that moment on, I was motivated to this mindset of like, what makes me different? Because he was right. If someone turns on the TV and I read a script that says, hey, the Bearcats played Xavier tonight, a big college basketball game at the Cintas Center. Let's go to the highlights. Here's highlight number 1. Here's highlight number 2, 3, 4, and 5, and on down you go. Here's the final score. Here's reaction from the teams. Reaction from the teams. UC is going to play Morehead State next Saturday at noon, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for watching. You can get that anywhere. I mean, you can get that anywhere. That is going to the grocery store and buying vanilla ice cream every single time. But if you want to get some Rocky Road or Rainbow Sherbet, if you want to be something different, man, you got to set yourself apart. And that starts with the writing. And so what I started to do more of, and I've always done this, but to answer your question 10 minutes later, Kyle, I always try to find a way to write to something that fits my personality. And that is sharing a little bit of my background, of who I am. I'm a little bit off the wall. It's referencing something that I think is like ties in. And, if you go to church at all, like Kyle, I know you do, and I grew up in church, pastors always have like an analogy, like everything ties in. Like, hey, I was mowing the lawn and I thought of God and how God represents every blade of grass, or, whatever. Like pastors tie everything in together. And so I started to try to think of more analogies, but really it comes back to the writing and just being who I am. Kyle, I am a strange person. Joe Danneman will tell you that. I have a strange sense of humor, and that's who I am on camera for the most part. There are times where I will say things and Joe will look at me like, are you out of your mind? But that is who I am. And so you either like it or you don't. Maybe I don't get hired because of it at some places. Obviously, it worked out here. But the other thing that sets me apart, I think, is the storytelling. I want to tell stories that connect people to someone. I don't want to be a part of the story. I don't want it to be me. Hey, I'm here sitting with someone and this story is about this person, but here's why I'm a part of it. I want the story to be on that subject, and I want to tell their story. And I think storytelling has to happen more often than not. Our job cannot just be highlights and post-game reaction. It cannot just be big game on Friday night. Here's sound from the coach and the players about the big game. It's a big game. Back after this. It's got to be, sure, there's a big game on Friday night, but did you know that this team has 2 players who are playing for their mom who has cancer and can't come to games anymore? Like, you gotta ask questions sometimes that are uncomfortable. You gotta ask people straight up, is there anything else going on that maybe no one else knows that is kind of a unique part of like who you are? And try to like it takes like, you got to work on it, but it takes time. So I would say those are the top 2 things. And I know it's a long answer. I apologize for that.
No, I love that, Jeremy, because
it's just
funny.
being unique.
No, I mean, when I had a similar situation, I mean, you and I, we're basically looking in the mirror right now, right? Young white guys. I actually had an agent suggest the same thing. Like, hey, I can place you much easier as a news reporter.
Yeah.
And so it was harder for me to get or get an agent than it was for me to get a sports job. So,
wow. Yeah. I mean, I not to cut you off, I had help getting an agent. I don't have him anymore, but before I came here, I had help getting an agent. And he told me, agents are brutally honest as well. And that's something that's funny because like he told me, you look young, you sound like you're in college, you probably need to start smoking. And I said, well, I can't do much about a lot of these things here, so just help me out, man. It ended up working out, but they're brutally honest, man. They'll tell you things, how they see TV, and they know what works, and so it's kind of funny.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that too. Like I said, it's tough. It's a grind, no doubt. So like I said, so tip of the cap to you, like I said, in Cincinnati, in your home state, if you will, and sky's the limit with whatever you want to do with this. But let me ask you, how did you develop some of those skills? You mentioned the writing. Is there anything that you did or do continue to work on to try to get better at that craft, or your storytelling, or anything, how you develop your skills?
Yeah, I listen and I watch stories. People can think of Tom Rinaldi as one of the greatest storytellers really of my lifetime. And I think it's important to try to figure out how they do what they do and not necessarily be them. You don't want to try to recreate them. It's like trying to be a cover band. You play the song and people know that it's not really authentic or as good as it should be. But learn from those things and take notes and understand how people use different shot composition. I mean, it's a copycat kind of business. You'll see things done. If you're here in Cincinnati and you fly out on business to Phoenix, Arizona, and you watch local TV in Phoenix, you'll think, oh, we do something like that. But I haven't seen that done the way that they did that shot, or the way that they kind of tied in those sound bites with their tracks. And I think those kind of things are things you can learn from. I've learned a lot from, I don't want to puff him up too much. I've learned a lot from Joe Danneman. I think Joe D is, and I've been working with him for 7 years now, he is someone who is really good at giving advice, but not saying the way you did it was wrong to your face. He kind of just talks about what he thinks is a good idea. And I think he understands you'll eventually pick up on that if maybe you're doing it a different way. Mm-hmm. Not that he always believes his way is the right way, but he just has a way of carrying you through a story. The way that he does his writing, he ties things together. He will say things in a track, write things that are clever and creative without being over the top. That's something that is a huge thing that I've learned, Kyle, is that you can be, because when I do highlights, sometimes I'm a little over the top. I'm a little, I'll make a joke, but I'll really push it because I'm a little, that's how my humor is. But when you're doing a track or you're telling a story, you can be clever and creative without saying something that is like pushing the audience to really see what you're saying. You can kind of just slide it in there and keep walking through that story. And so I've learned some of those things, but honestly, it's just, it's just picking up stuff along the way, Kyle, because I can go back to my first 3 to 5 years in TV and watch a story and think, man, I was off. Like little things like sometimes giving a track between a track and a sound bite, giving it a second or a second and a half of breathing room, even 12 to 14 frames of breathing room. Sometimes little things like that let the audience digest something better instead of slapping it all together. You know what I mean? And so there are just so many little things that you pick up, but I pick it up mostly from people that I work with and watching competitors and watching the best of the best, like Tom Rinaldi, and thinking, I don't want to do it that way because I don't like what I see when I watch that, but I do want to try this next time. So that's kind of my best answer for that.
That's good stuff, Jeremy. Let me let's end with a few quicker, fun ones. At least 2 of the 3 will be. First one, most embarrassing moment in TV, whether that be on TV, at work, whatever that be, whatever comes to mind that's obviously appropriate for, well, I guess anything's really appropriate for YouTube, but what comes to mind as far as embarrassing moments? Because you've been in the game long enough that you've got to have some that come to mind.
Well, there's one that is on my Mount Rushmore, and there's nothing else that's even close to it. Everything else is like at the bottom. So I'm gonna give you the one, and then I'll give you a quick other one that's a lesson learned recently. Here's the one. This is the easy go-to. I've probably been in TV for about 1 year, maybe a month or two. I was in Zanesville, Ohio at WHIZ, my second stop, but I've only been in TV for a little more than a year. And I'm doing an on-cam. It is the opening on-cam to my 5-minute sportscast of the night. Big basketball game was Zanesville against someone, I don't know, Tri-Valley. And I said, Zanesville, last time they played Tri-Valley, missed a shot with just a few seconds left on the, I didn't say clock. I did not say clock. The L in clock was not present. Just a few seconds left on the, where's the L? What happened to the L? And so I said that. And we go straight, it's the last line of my on cam. We go to VO, and there are a bunch of young kids because we're all like younger 20s at this station. They are melting on the floor, dying, laughing. I'm in VO and I'm laughing so hard I can't get through it. Because in my read, when I misspoke, I smirked and I said, clock. And then we went to highlights. And so I posted it on YouTube. My wife said, what are you doing? I was like, it's hilarious. She's like, you're going to become one of those like local TV. And so I took it down, and to this day, I regret that I took it down. I wish it was still on YouTube. So that happened. I did not say clock on TV, Kyle. I'm not kidding you, for a year straight. Yeah. I would say a few seconds left in the game. I couldn't say clock on TV for a year. I was terrified. The other one is more of a recent thing, and I'll just tell this quick. This was an interaction I had with Vontez Burfict with the Bengals a few years back. And he gave me a quote in the locker room when I asked if he could do an interview that basically said, bleep off, I don't give a bleep, blah, blah, blah. It was a long form, no comment, but in a really rude and kind of like terrible manner of saying it. And I tweeted out a quote. Vontez didn't want to talk. He said, you can bleep off with, I bleeped it out, obviously. And it got a lot of reaction. Vontez ended up sending me a DM and basically threatening me. And that's okay. Vontez did that to a lot of people. But at the time, I felt like, man, I didn't need to quote him on that. The way he treated me kind of like gave me some sort of rise to think, I'm going to go ahead and quote him and put this out there instead of just saying Vontez didn't want to talk. You know what I mean? I've learned from a couple instances like those that later I felt like embarrassed by, even though no one that I know was like, dude, most people said Vontez is a jerk. We get it. But in my heart, I was like, man, I didn't need to do that, And so I've learned from some dumb mistakes like that. And that's the whole different end of the spectrum, where the other one is just a slip on TV.
Well, I appreciate that transparency. And anybody that picks it up, like, that's just great, Jeremy. The fact that you acknowledge those things, and you look back and you get better. I mean, that's all you can do, right? So
sure.
How about most challenging situation you've been in, or the most challenging season or story, or what comes to mind when you had this challenge and that you overcame it, learned from it, and like I said, moved on and got better? Anything that comes to mind as far as like, a challenging moment for you in this career?
I think this is probably a little obvious in 2020. I think that this year, Kyle, and I don't know if other people you've interviewed have said the same kind of thing. I can point to a lot of things. This year has been the most challenging for me as a sports guy.
Yeah.
Not anymore right now because, sports are happening and we're doing interviews via Zoom at least. But when things shut down in March, you go through these steps of like sports depression. We all went through this. But I remember thinking, early March when things started to shut down, like they're not going to take March Madness away. You have this like end all be all thought of like, they might take some of these little things away. You can't kill March Madness. You can't kill seasons. You can't kill sports. And then it started happening. And then I had this thought of, well, what am I going to be at the station? How are they going to use me? What are they going to do with me? And our boss came to us and said, we want you to tell stories, but like uplifting stories, There might be a lot of stories of the day that are coronavirus related, like, this sport got canceled or whatever because of coronavirus, but we want you to tell positive, uplifting stories. It might just be that someone, like one story I told, went and played bagpipes for their grandma who was in a nursing home and couldn't see anyone, but they were like 100 feet away playing bagpipes for her, and it made her day and people clapped, and nothing to do with sports. But the most challenging part was every single day I had to come to work and enterprise something, man. It was like sports are just handed to us. You come in, today's kind of a slow day for me at work, but like there are just games coming up this weekend. There are things happening. Nothing was happening for months. Mm-hmm. And I know you know this, but like just being in that grind of daily being like, what am I going to do today? What story am I going to tell? What is happening in the world that I can share something that is positive, that when people turn on the news tonight, because I'm a very positive guy, I want them to see something like, today sucked, coronavirus is happening, but something cool happened with someone's life, or they used it in some kind of a cool manner. And that was a huge challenge for me. And when we got through that season, it was rewarding. I learned a lot from it. But a lot of the working from home and doing those stories, Kyle, in that unique manner without having any face-to-face connection with someone, like sports came back, and it was like when the Reds came back in July, I was like, oh my gosh, like life is normal again. Like this is easy, this is cake.
Right.
Being at Great American Ballpark in a weird setting, being 200 feet away from the players, but still being in the ballpark was like this is living. This is what it's supposed to be. And I had this like wave of feelings of like, wow, the last 2 or 3 months was crazy, man. Like I can't believe that it lasted that long, and everything we did with the sports challenges to fill content, I can't believe that we got through it. And so, it may happen again. I have no idea, but I learned so much from that extremely challenging season in my job.
Now, I'm glad you shared that because no one really has. And I mean, I haven't talked to a ton of sports people, but yeah, what do you do when your job is basically shut down? Your job must go on. So I'm glad to hear, you guys are getting creative. You and Joe together are just so creative in general. The stuff you guys do, a two-man team in a market like Cincinnati is just incredible. So last question, it's going to be a quick one. How many different ways do you hear your last name pronounced?
Okay.
What's your favorite?
My favorite is Ranch, because people flip the U. And they make it an N out of nowhere. I mean, Joe, I was called Ranch. I've been called Ranch a few times. And so Joe, I forget why he did this or what the connection was, had the entire Cubcats student section chant one night, "We love Ranch," and put it on the news when he was at the game because they were making fun of me. I've heard, with telemarketers growing up, I've heard Rauch, Rauch, Ranch. I'm trying to think if there are any other weird ones. Probably like a Rauch or something.
Yeah.
One telemarketer in my entire life, I have no idea why, said, "Is there a Mr. Rao there?" Like how it's pronounced, Rao, because it rhymes with cow, is what I tell everyone. And I was so delighted. I was like, this telemarketer can have me for the next hour, whatever you want. So it's very often mispronounced. I actually had someone along the way tell me, you should change your name, make your name like, Jeremy Adams, whatever it might be, something simple that people can pronounce. Right. Like, no, man, I want my weird German family name that means smoke. I want it on TV.
Yeah.
So, Rauch sticks.
That's awesome. Jeremy, you're awesome. I appreciate your time, man. I know you've got to run in and get some actual work done today. And like I said, I just appreciate you sharing your time and your knowledge, experience, all the above. Just priceless stuff, man. Hopefully we can do this down the road.
Kyle, you're the man. Thanks, dude.
And thank you for checking out this channel. If you found this content beneficial, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share it with someone you think might find it beneficial as well, because this channel was simply started and created to serve you, to help others grow, to learn how other successful TV journalists do or did it. So take what serves you so you can get better faster and reach your next level.